Okay, so this session is about planning apps. So ultimately, this is what all of Zoholics developers is about. So before I get started, I just wanted to ask you guys some questions. How many people here, can I get a solid show of hands, want a real response? How many of you have made an app already in Zoho Creator? Okay, pretty good response there. And then I was just wondering if we could get some volunteers to answer some questions. So maybe Taylor can run around with the mic. How long have you been using Creator? So let's start this off actually with a show of hands. How many people have been using Creator for over a year? Can you raise your hand? All right, so we got a few people, that some good experience in here. And how many people have never used Creator? Don't be shy, okay? Show yourselves. Awesome. So really just make sure if you have a question, just ask someone in a red lanyard. And if they don't know the answer, they'll find someone else with another red lanyard and they'll help you out. It's really, we have to accommodate a lot of different skill sets. So we'll do the best that we can to make sure everybody gets something that they want. So for the people that have already built apps, I was wondering, how many of you had a blueprint? Did you start with a plan, or did you just start haphazard? Yes, so would you mind telling the crowd about that a little bit? What kind of app did you make?
We had to create an operational app for a company that works with credit and finance.
Okay.
So started with user case scenarios and talked to the end users, what they needed to get from it, identified what KPI were so that we knew how we were going to track them, and then figured out what kind of modules and functionality we needed, and then got down to the point where, okay, this is what the user is going to see on the screen when they do this, so on and so forth.
Awesome. So I assume this is the kind of situation where you had a few different types of users maybe. You had to go and do some interviews, and you had to figure out how each person needed that app to work differently. Each role, right. Okay, so that's great. He had a really good plan, and sounds like you built something pretty cool. So looks like we got another volunteer over here. What did you build in Creator?
I created a database with a teacher recruitment program in Oakland, California that helped us to not only identify and track teachers that they were recruiting, but also track their professional development. And it was ultimately used by the program director and her staff to really guide the work that they were doing, and it was designed around an evaluation plan that we had already developed. So we knew what data elements we wanted to collect in that.
Okay, awesome.
Work.
Yeah, that's great. So the reason I'm asking you guys this is because before you just jump in and start building something, you need to have a really clear idea of what you're trying to do. Because once you have that idea in mind and you know exactly what information you're trying to get and what you're trying to do with it, who's going to use it, you need to answer these kinds of questions before you know what you want to build in your app. So let's move forward. Endless possibilities. I don't know if you guys have heard this before, but this is like the tagline of Creator. So this is what we say to try and articulate the value of Zoho Creator. It's an application for building applications. I mean, it's something you can really do whatever you want. I mean, Vijay was just talking about this analogy of an artist who is making something to a developer or an end user or whatever it is who's making an app. It's really just, it's limited by very few things. It's whatever you want to set your mind to. But that's not what we're here for. What we're here for is one possibility. This is your possibility. So you came here because there's something you want to build. There's a problem in your business that you want to solve, or maybe a set of problems you want to solve. So in between our sessions today, we'll be showing some videos, and those videos are going to show you how some customers have built some really cool things with Zoho Creator. And really, I mean, it's amazing how many different kinds of industries it is used in, and how many different types of people have managed to build things using Zoho Creator. So this is the point of all of Zoholics, really. It's not about endless possibilities, it's about your possibility. And for the rest of this presentation, I want you to start thinking about what your possibility is, what exactly you're trying to do with Zoho Creator. So I got started learning Zoho Creator, as Taylor mentioned earlier, by building an app to keep track of ping pong scores. And I mean, when you consider that there's entire businesses that are run on Zoho Creator, and that organizations as big as the Mexican government have been using Zoho Creator to manage projects throughout an entire country, it's pretty amazing that I got started by keeping track of a ping pong score. It's something that anybody can really get started with, and however far you take it is just dependent on your willpower, essentially. So, when you make a plan, where do you start? Plans come from problems. You probably have problems that you set out to solve, and that's probably why you're here today, and that's what I want you to start thinking about. So, even though every app is different, every app is unique that's made in Zoho Creator, a lot of them are solving the same problems. So, think about the kind of problems that your business is trying to solve. Most likely, the problems you're trying to solve are very similar to the problems a lot of people in this room are trying to solve. So one thing I encourage you to do while you're at Zoholics is not only talk to all of us in the red lanyards, but talk to the people sitting around you, or talk to people at lunch during the breaks, and find out what they're trying to do with Creator, because you can, A, get help from them, but also you can realize that there's some things you could do with Creator that maybe didn't even occur to you, like making a ping pong app. So let's step back. This is how businesses used to solve problems. They would collect information on a piece of paper. Everybody's seen this. You fill out a paper form when you go to the doctor's office, you turn it in, they do something with it, and then you get your appointment. So this worked for a really long time, but it's not really a great way to do things. Because actually, even though this paper was solving problems, they're getting information, they're using it, they're storing it, they're analyzing it, it was also causing some problems. And actually, every single piece of paper was its own problem. Because when you collect information with paper, eventually you end up with something like this. You just have tons and tons and tons of paper, and it's everywhere. So let's just think about some of the issues that were caused by dealing with our information on paper. The first problem was that you needed a good way to access this information. So we came up with filing cabinets. You take the piece of paper, put it in a folder, put that folder in a drawer, but then you end up with massive rooms full of filing cabinets, and there's no more space left in your office for anything else because you have so much paper in there. So that was also a problem because when you needed to get a particular piece of information, think about how much work it takes to get it with paper. You had to go to the filing cabinet, you had to find the exact drawer that it was in, you had to find the exact folder it was in. It could be disorganized. Okay? So, I mean, look at what all these people are doing here. This is just tons of human hours spent finding things, but also sorting things. In order to make it easy to find things, it took countless hours of maintenance to keep everything alphabetized, keep everything color-coded, keep it in its place. And there was some other problems. If you wanted to get insights from all of this information, all of this data, there was no easy way to do it. Sure, you could go and you could find one piece of paper and you could read it, but what if you wanted to collect the average of a bunch of pieces of data? What if you wanted to make a chart that showed a change over time? There's not really any good way to do that. And then the other problem is that paper can only be in one place at a time. So if you're working across distances, this is not very efficient. You had to actually go to the place where the information was, you had to pull it out, and you couldn't have multiple people working with the same information at the same time. So then we moved into the next era, and we started using spreadsheets to work with our information. And spreadsheets are pretty cool because now you can email information. It's not just in one spot. You could send it to someone miles and miles away and they could get it right away. But spreadsheets have their own set of problems. So first problem, which I think is pretty apparent, is that they're pretty ugly. This is just a mess to look at. It's really hard to see what you're looking for. If you wanted to sort through this and rearrange things, it would cause problems because your formulas would get messed up. There's no good way to do that. If you wanted to search through it and find one particular piece of information, there's usually not a good way to do it. And then think about how you collect information with spreadsheets. This is probably the biggest problem they have. So when you're typing information in, there's always the risk that you're going to type it in the wrong spot, or you're going to erase over something that you needed to know, or you're going to delete a formula that took a long time to make. But it's not just that. It's that collecting information depended on having multiple copies of this spreadsheet on multiple different machines. So you would have 5 different computers, and maybe they're in different offices, and so when you need to collect information, you're constantly emailing people back and forth. So, I mean, just think about making a monthly expense report with something like this. I mean, maybe this is a problem you're familiar with. Maybe this is a problem that you still have. You know, everybody has a different copy of the spreadsheet, and everybody has different bits of information. And when it comes time to make the report at the end of the month, you've got to get information from one person and another person and another person. You got to make sure you have the most up-to-date versions of their file. You got to copy it all over. You got to put it into a new spreadsheet. And then you got to select all the cells. And this process just takes forever. It's wasting a lot of your time. And really, all of this is work that you should not have to do. So, spreadsheets are also not really that secure. I mean, we think that they're secure because, sure, it's on your computer's pretty safe. So, think about how you share spreadsheets. When you give it to somebody, you're giving them the whole thing, right? But what if you want to only show them some of the information on your spreadsheet? Then you have to create a new spreadsheet. You have to copy it all. You have to paste it into a new one. You have to email it. It takes a lot of time. And also, you don't really get to control what sort of rights people have with the spreadsheet. So you can really only control the whole thing in one go. You can't say, okay, this column of information is really important, so I'm just going to select all that. I'm going to say you're not allowed to edit that. That's just going to stay. There's no good way to do that. So this means that even people with good intentions could accidentally erase data. This isn't just about some hypothetical scenario where some hacker is trying to get in and read your sales data for the month. I mean, people in your own business could be deleting things on accident and not even realizing it. So ultimately, the main problem with spreadsheets is that they are not centralized. because they exist in so many places at once, and because they exist in so many different versions, you're never really sure if you're up to date with everyone else who you're working with. There's no good way to make sure that you're sharing information efficiently. But at a certain point, we started making something a little bit more complicated than spreadsheets. And so we ended up in this era where we had macros, and we had Visual Basic, and all these applications. And so you would build these, and you would have them sitting on different computers, and it solved some problems, but it created a lot of other problems too. The main issue with all these installed applications is that they're still on a bunch of different machines. Your information is scattered. So you have 5 different versions of your application, and it needs to run on 5 different computers that have different operating systems. And each person hasn't updated their operating system to the same level, so that created a lot of problems. And when you think about accessing it, I mean, usually your computer at work is sitting behind some kind of firewall, so when you needed to pull information from somewhere else or push it to another service, there was no good way to do it. It gets kind of stuck in these different machines. And so really a lot of the problems that we had with spreadsheets, where your information is scattered, where there's no good way to collect it all, still exist. But some things did get a little bit better with installed apps. I mean, you could at least give somebody a bit of an interface. So instead of having to type into a spreadsheet, they could maybe type into a form. You don't have to worry about them erasing over your old data. So that solved a few problems, but ultimately we were left with this. So companies would create these Frankenstein monsters by taking all of these different applications that were never built to talk to each other and sewing them together and electrocuting them to life until they kind of barely made everything work in an organization. And, you know, this solved part of the problem. You could get information from all these different places and sort of get it talking to each other. You could get information from one department and information from another department and get them in one spot. You know, you could get people in your business actually working together a little bit. But this was a really expensive way of doing that because you had to hire these huge IT departments to build these things for in-house software to get it all to work. And that takes a lot of time. It takes a big investment. And it's usually ended up being pretty buggy in the end. So the thing is, why am I talking about all of this? It seems like the past. It seems like history. So why are we even discussing it? The thing is, this isn't really history. This is what's happening today. And I bet a lot of you recognize these same problems in your business. The same slowdown that happens when you're trying to work together with a bunch of spreadsheets or get information that's stored in a filing cabinet, but you need to email it to someone. I mean, just think about all of the ways that your business is moving slower than it needs to move. So, could I just get a show of hands? How many of you think that your business is too dependent on holding a piece of paper in your hands? Does anybody have that problem still? Looks like quite a few of you do. How many of you think that your business is too dependent on emailing a spreadsheet to someone and then working together somehow by combining all this different information? Show of hands. How many people have that problem? Looks like a lot of you do. So the reason I'm bringing this up is because this still happens. This isn't history, but it doesn't need to happen. We don't have to waste this time. So let's look at how a business is operating. So this business has a system where visitors show up, and they need to get these visitors to meet with the employees that work there. So maybe they have a paper sign-in form at the front desk like this. You've probably seen this at a lot of businesses. You walk up, there's a little thing, you sign in your name and the date, and they want to keep track of all the visitors that came. So then the next step is they need to reach the employee that they're there to see. So you can call them or you can text them. Somehow you need to get the person that they're visiting out to the front. And then the employee comes down and they meet with the visitor. And then we need a way to see our visitor history, right? You want to see, oh, who was that guy that I was meeting with that last week? His name is on the tip of my tongue. You need to be able to go back in time a little bit and see that. So if a business is doing all of this on paper, there's a lot of problems, right? So one problem is that there's no privacy. When you go and you sign in on that little paper sheet, what do you see? You see the names of all the people that went before you, right? That's not very, it's not very private. It's not a very nice way to treat your visitors, just expose their private meetings to the public like that. And then there's another way that this is inefficient. So text employee, you need to get the visitor meeting with the employee that works there. How do you do that? Well, probably you just have a person working at the front desk, and they have to get interrupted from their work, and they have to go and look up in the phone directory and make a call and say, hey, your appointment's here, you got to come down and meet them. And so their day is getting interrupted every time a visitor comes in. So ultimately, there's a few goals in this kind of system. You need to collect information about your visitor. You need to process that information. You need to act on it. So that means once they sign in, you need to react to it. Who are you here to visit? Okay, let me go get them. And then there's the analysis. So you need to be able to see who all your visitors are. When is your office busy? When is it not busy? That could help you schedule your meetings, maybe something like that. But there's also some requirements. You want this information to be accessible to the people who need to see it, but you also want it to be secure, right? So when we use this paper sign-in sheet, we're not really getting either of those. This is not accessible. If I want to see who visited, I have to walk down to the front desk, I have to rifle through the filing cabinet, I have to pull out the sign-in sheet from a month ago, and I have to scroll through look through the list, and I have to see who was here to meet with me. It's not very secure. Everybody can see everybody else's information on that sheet. But most of all, it's not very efficient. We're slowing down everyone's day by doing it this way. So let's think about this same problem through another lens. What if we had an app that could do this? So instead of going and writing your name on a piece of paper, you could show up at the front desk, and maybe there's just like a little iPad or a computer there, and you put in your name there. And now we're fixing one of our problems because you can no longer see all of the people that came before you. We're giving people privacy. Text an employee. So when we have an app, we don't need to make the person at the front desk stop what they're doing and go look up the employee and find their number in the directory. That just is a complete waste of time. So instead, we could have our app notify the employee right away. You come in, you say, I'm meeting with Dylan, and then texts Dylan right away so he knows to come out. He comes out faster, it's more efficient, less time is being wasted. And when you go to see the visitor history, it's much easier. Instead of going through that filing cabinet and finding the exact day that you had that appointment, looking through the long list and trying to find your name on it, you can just search. You can say, okay, let me see all the appointments I've had. It'll show you all of them right away. And so the process of collecting information, processing it and reacting to it, and analyzing it, All of that is getting a lot faster. So let's look at one more example. Inventory management. There's a business, and they need to check how many items are left in the warehouse each day, right? So they walk through the warehouse, and they check, and they say, okay, we're getting low on this, we're getting low on that, and they put it all on a list. And then they enter that in a spreadsheet. They have to have the barcode number. And so they send the spreadsheet to the manager, and they say, look, here's the barcode number of all the items that are getting low, and you need to order more of these, or we're going to run out pretty soon. So this process is not very fast, okay? And emailing it to the manager is probably not a good idea, because the manager is getting hundreds of emails a day, and he doesn't always see these emails. So information is getting lost. Even though you send it to him, you're not really sending it through the best method. So they enter the barcode, and then using an app, they text the manager, so he gets that information right away. It's more of a direct line to him instead of going to the massive inbox that's filled with emails. The manager refills the inventory, and then an expense report gets created. And when you're doing this in an app, this part can happen automatically. So you don't need to go at the end of the month and say, okay, these are all the things we ordered, let's put them all in a spreadsheet, and then you have to ask someone else, oh, how much does that item cost? And you do the column with all the items and the column with all the costs. All of that is already set up. And better yet, instead of entering this information about the barcodes in a spreadsheet, you can just scan it. You can just use a phone, scan the barcode, and that's already in there. So the requirements for this kind of thing are pretty much the same. You need your information to be accessible. You need it to be secure. You need to do all of this efficiently. And one more requirement, you want to be able to do this on a mobile phone, because it's a lot faster when you're walking through the warehouse. So maybe you'll see something in common between the two of these. Ultimately, we are doing the same things. We're collecting information, we're processing information, and we're analyzing it. And I was also going to talk about the DMV, but it looks like I'm running short on time. So I know you all wanted to hear about the DMV, but I'm just going to skip that one for now. So the answer to these problems of how do we collect, analyze, and process our information could be cloud apps, because this solves a lot of our problems. Instead of having a bunch of apps on a bunch of different machines and never being sure if they're going to work together, you just have one app, and it's on the internet, and you can connect to it from anywhere. It doesn't matter if you're on a Mac, it doesn't matter if you're on Windows. Everybody is seeing the same thing at the same time. There's no emailing back and forth. When information goes into that app, it's there for everyone. There's no waiting. So what you need to think about today is what the problems are in your business, and what are the requirements. Where is your app going to be used? Who is going to be using it? And ultimately, you can ask yourself 3 questions while you're planning an app to help you figure out what you're trying to do. So what information do you need that you're not getting? What work is a waste of time that you shouldn't have to do? And what do you want to learn from all this information? What insights are you trying to derive from it that you could find out faster, or maybe that you're not even finding out at all right now? And so really, the overlap between what the problems are in your business and what the abilities of Creator are gives you a possibility. What is that possibility? It's your app. So when you draw up your plan, when you think about what problems you're trying to solve, think about what Creator can help you do. Which problems is it solving? So even though everybody has a different business and everybody's kind of trying to build a different thing, ultimately, most Creator apps are solving the same problems. They're making your business more efficient. And that is the point of Zoholics. So, does anybody have any questions before we go on?